Welcome to Undercurrents of Romance, the show that celebrates every subgenre of romantic fiction. In each episode, I peel back the layers of your favorite love stories and chat with the talented authors who bring them to life. I'm your host, Tracey Devlyn. Now, let's dive in with today's guest. Hello, romantics. I'm here with Eliza Kennedy to talk about her newest contemporary romance, Lucky Night. Welcome to the show, Eliza.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm very happy to be here.
So happy to have you. So I can't wait to get started on Lucky Night, and I know you've got a hardcover there, so feel free
I
to pop
do,
that up.
yes. I
Mine's
just
just
got it last week. I'm so excited. It smells like a real book and feels like a real
yeah.
book. I'm just thrilled.
There's nothing like getting that copy in the mail,
It's
is it?
true.
Your
Yeah.
final copies.
Yep.
So, why don't you, if you don't mind, just get us started telling us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure, sure. I live in the Hudson Valley, um, and uh, I have been a writer for about 13 years. Before that, I was a lawyer, and I've written three novels now. I've done a little bit of screenwriting, and I read all the time. And, I'm just a huge fan of books and romance books and everything.
Yeah, great, great, great. Well, as I have already mentioned, we're here to celebrate Lucky Night, and I wonder what you can. There's, I have a lot to say about this, which we'll talk
Okay,
about a little
good.
bit more, but um, I want to be careful of spoilers. And
Okay.
so, what can you tell us as far as the setup for this, for Jenny and Nick's lucky night?
Sure. Sure. Jenny and Nick are the two characters in the novel, which takes place over the course of a single night in a single room. These two have been having an affair for 6 years. They meet every once in a while, once a month or so, just for a couple of hours, for some sex and conversation and kind of an escape from real life. So this particular night is a little bit different. They're going to spend a full night together for the first time. So expectations are kind of high. They arrive, everything seems fine, and then a fire alarm goes off. And from there begins to be a little bit of conflict between them about what they should do. They eventually decide to shelter in place, and from there, they wait and talk and begin to argue a little bit about what's going on as they wonder about an all clear or a rescue that doesn't seem to be coming. So that's the setup.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, I noticed in your acknowledgments, you mentioned in there that the storyline came to you about 10 years ago, and you
Yeah.
worked on it a few times, and then you get frustrated with it. And I think you even said there might have been a few tears involved.
So many things.
And then you set it aside. And so I was really curious, when I read that, what made you decide that it was the right time for this story?
It I would say probably over the course of those 10 years, it was more than a dozen times I kept coming back to it. And so the right time just happened to be the time when I got it right. And
Mm,
it had to do with, I couldn't get the characters right at first. I have two people, in a room who shouldn't be there together. They are doing something wrong. And so, I don't want them to be necessarily forgiven. I think, there are reasons why they're there, but I don't present them as people who, are necessarily lovable and flawless. So,
mhm.
but I had to get them right. You had to understand them and understand the complications that led them there, even if you judge them. So that took a long time, and then kind of making them different enough that they would argue and yet similar enough that like they are there together. So
Yeah.
all of these things, and then finally it had to do with like how I was going to tell it. I knew I wanted it to be kind of seamless and happening, in real time almost. And I just feel like for a long time, I just didn't know how to do it. And so, almost 2 years ago now, I went back to it kind of between other projects one more time, and somehow it worked. I mean, I didn't know at the time it was working. I thought it was just another failed until like it kept going. It kept going. I thought, oh, do I have it? You probably know that there's that great uncertainty for so much of a book where like, can I pull it off? Does this make sense? Will
Yeah.
anyone care other than me?
Right.
Why care?
Yeah.
I don't know. And so that took a long time. But I can now look back and say, oh, that was the moment when like
Mhm.
it all came together.
Yeah, it really, when I read that in your acknowledgments, it really spoke to me because I had the same issue with a manuscript I was working on and had
Uh-huh.
same thing. The idea came to me many years ago. I worked on it, I worked on it, I worked on it, and so right now I am like two scenes away from finishing it finally,
Ooh,
and I
that's
feel
good.
finally good about it. You know what I
Because
mean?
you
Yeah,
know it's coming. That's so
I
good.
just didn't feel ready for so many reasons I won't bore you
Mhm.
all with, but yeah, it really spoke to me. So I'm so glad that you were able to work through that too, to bring us this really incredible story. You talked about how to do it, and the structure of this novel is unlike anything I've ever read before. Now, it might be out there, but I have never read a book where there's not a trace of dialogue in it.
Mm,
And but you managed to just like propel me through these pages with nothing more than Nick and Jenny's scattered thoughts and conflicting feelings. And it was such a unique and fun experience. And I wonder just how you did this, how you knew that it would be okay to do this, because it seems like in my mind that this would be such like a publishing taboo, no
mm,
dialogue. You know what I
mhm.
mean? But it
Yeah.
worked. It so worked, everybody. You have to
Well,
read this book.
I do think it takes a minute, right? Like
Mm,
you start and you don't really know what's happening. And what happened was I think I knew right away that that what the book is really about is deception. That we have two people in this room who have been lying to people for years,
mhm,
who've been lying to each other, and to an extent have been lying to themselves about why they're there and what they're looking for. And what I wanted to be able to show was um, how it all kind of like seamlessly moved together from what was in Jenny's head to and her perspective of things, to Nick being in the same place at the same time and seeing things fundamentally differently because they're such different people. Now, I do think, you know, there are no quotation marks, which is
right,
the
right.
risky thing. They're speaking, but it's not always clear, right? Like what's being said or what's being thought. And that kind of like I know it's a risk too, and I know it's sort of asking things of readers, like not quite understanding. But that too, like to me, it felt like of a piece with wanting to just contain the story in
Hmm.
one um kind of jolt of energy with just these two people. And so it felt like um I wanted it to be a little uncertain because I also feel like maybe because I'm getting older and I'm like, did I just say that or did I just think it? But I do think there are like times in life where you're not really the difference between in my head and out in the world is like not as
Yeah.
clear as we think. And I kind of wanted to reflect that too.
Yeah, it absolutely worked. And I think probably I should have actually marked it whenever I got into the rhythm of it. So it probably was maybe at the end of the first chapter, maybe about
Uh-huh.
midway through the second chapter, somewhere in there. I'm like, okay, okay, I get what she's doing here. I see it. I feel it. I
Oh, good.
understand. And it was so much fun.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Um,
Thank you.
going through and hearing, and because that's really what it felt like, you were hearing their inner dialogue and
Mhm.
thoughts, unfiltered,
Mhm.
unfiltered thoughts. And it was so much fun watching the difference between the male perspective and the female perspective. And I don't want to give
Okay.
anything away, but the whole part about her butt, you know, I found myself just cracking up.
I
Wow.
have to say, like, so I've written my first two novels are first person, from a woman's point of view.
Yeah.
And so this was my first effort to really be in a man's head. And it was so much fun because, I feel like in many ways, I would say both of the characters have a little bit of me, a little bit made up, other, bits and pieces from
Yeah.
other people. I'm probably more like Jenny than I am like Nick. She's a writer. She's got certain insecurities and all these things. And he's this aggrieved lawyer who's very
Yeah.
brilliant and just like full of complaints. So, but it was just, I don't know. Once I landed on the voice, it was just so much fun. And then I thought, okay, it's a book about an affair. There's gonna be sex in there, and here's a man, and I have an opportunity to let him in his head because she's not hearing it, think whatever it is that he would think. And so, yes, Jenny's butt plays a key role in his
My
thought.
gosh, it was so great. It was so great. One of the things that I like to do is dive into, one of the things I like to dive into on this show is finding the story's undercurrent with the author,
Mhm.
and it's that second beating heart of the story that flows beneath the lover's journey. Now, you might have mentioned this, what it is, earlier when you said deception. So I just want to go ahead and pose that question out there to you to see, if you think that deception is that undercurrent that's flowing beneath Jenny and Nick's story, or if there's something more, because sometimes there are more than one, there is more than one undercurrent.
Yeah, I mean, deception is obviously a big deal. It's almost like an overcurrent, right? Or it's just the
Right.
current. But I actually think there's something else that's closely connected to that I do try to get at through the book. And it's really the notion of a person's identity. These two people, when they come into this room, are different people than they are when they're out in the world. And I
Mm,
actually have Jenny's the character who, through the course of the book, I think really begins to sort of um, almost begins to obsess on this fact because she finds herself stuck in a place where she knows she shouldn't be. She's already loaded down with guilt about the
yeah.
affair. And the conversation that they have, makes her begin to realize that there's no place in her life where she hasn't lied in some way. And it
Hmm.
has to do with what she really wants and who she really is. And so, in a weird way, I think the process of like the fire approaching that room is a way for her, and then eventually Nick too, to kind of get to know themselves in a way that they
Yeah.
never had before. I suppose in the way, anytime someone is in a very dangerous situation,
Hmm.
life is at risk, you begin to think about the bigger things. And so, especially for Jenny, it's this notion that as a woman, we have these different roles. And she's a mother, and she's a wife, and she's a successful writer. She also happens to be the woman who meets this man every month or so for sex. And
Yeah.
why is she that person? Like, what did she need?
Yeah.
And she really, thinks about what it is to be Jenny, to be a
Hmm.
person in the world.
Yeah, it was interesting to see actually both of them kind of move through this arc over the course of the night, and then how they ended up towards the end. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was so much fun. Now, one of the things I like to also ask folks on this show is talking. This has more of a bit of a literary touch to it. I think your book has more of a literary feel to it. Uh, but what what would be two or three tropes that you could attach to this story? Like maybe like forced proximity might be one that you could go with. I don't know if you can think of any more.
Yeah, I think that is the big one. When I
Yeah.
came up with the idea, it was very much like who are two people who should not be stuck in a room together. So it's definitely that. I think, the notion of like opposites attract
Mm,
and what I always think is so interesting about that trope, which is, I think that we are not just we're not drawn to the other person because they're are opposite so much as like there might be something about them that we wish we could be or have. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think there's actually a lot of that, especially for Nick vis-a-vis Jenny and her
Yeah.
great success. Yeah, so I think it would be those two. I think there's more that I don't want to say because I might
Yeah,
give
yeah.
away things.
Yeah, I know. It's so
Yeah.
hard. You mentioned that you're a big reader. What can you think of a romance book that you've read recently that you loved and would recommend?
Absolutely. One of my I go through these reading jags, I'm sure you do too. Find a
Yeah, yeah.
writer and then you have to read everything. So there is a writer, her name is Penelope Fitzgerald, and she's English, and she was writing. She actually started very late in life. I think she published her first book when she was in her 50s, and she proceeded to write just this group of amazing novels. One of them is it's called The Gate of Angels, and it is very short, and it's a historical romance about a man who is a tutor or a fellow at a college in Cambridge. And one night he's riding his bicycle out in the on the road, and he crashes into a woman on a bicycle, and they each get knocked out. A farmer sees it and thinks that they're married, and sort of brings them into the house and puts them to bed together.
Uh,
They wake up. The man sees the woman, falls desperately in love with her, and then he falls asleep again, and then she's gone. And so
oh
the
my
rest of
gosh.
the book is really then we kind of go into their two lives and who they are. And there's a bit of erudite business about physics and what's happening. This was set in like 1913, so right before World War I.
Okay.
But at its heart, it is this like just classic romance of the instant love, searching, and then the ending is perfection. So
Great.
that is
That
my
sounds
recommendation.
okay. All right, great. That sounds wonderful. Before we go, can you give us a hint about what's coming up next? Any exciting projects you can talk about?
Well, the thing I'm working on now, which is really fun, is I am adapting Lucky Night for the stage.
Oh, fun.
So, I've done some screenwriting in the past, but I've never done a play, and I am having a great time just trying to really sort of like condense it, get get a lot of their inner thoughts somehow out, and just playing around with the notion of what it would look like and feel like if you're in a theater and seeing that room right in front of you with two people.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know how you're going to pull the best bits out of there because there's so many great bits. I don't know how you're going to
Yeah,
decide.
I agree. I don't know, but it's fun. Like it's actually kind of fun to rip out some pieces and see
Yeah.
what's left and imagine, real people having to kind of step into these voices and make it real. And so yeah, that's what I'm working on now. It's really fun.
All right, great, wonderful. Well, folks, when this episode airs, Lucky Night will be out, so be sure to order your copy today. Where is the best place for readers to connect with you online, Eliza?
I'm not really on social media,
You
so
know, I found that out, so I'm like, maybe I'm
I
just
am
missing
I
her.
am
But
actually I'm making gentle steps on Instagram, and I so
okay,
think I'm Eliza Cat Kennedy, like CAT.
okay,
So find me there, and
okay. Now,
yeah.
do you have a website that we can direct
I
folks to?
don't. No,
Okay, so
I
just
don't. Just
Instagram at this
Google.
point.
Instagram and
Okay.
Google.
Okay. All right, great. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
me. I really, really appreciate it. Love the book. Very much enjoyed talking to you about it. Um, and yeah, yeah, good luck. I think next week is your release
Yes, it
for
is.
it. So I
Yeah,
hope you're going to have fun with that and enjoy that so
too.
much.
All right. Thank you so much, Tracy.
You betcha. Many thanks to everyone listening. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Undercurrents of Romance. You can find more information about the show at tracydevlyn.com/podcast. Undercurrents of Romance is a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. I'll be back soon with another great romantic read. In the meantime, enjoy the adventure, everyone.